Okay, so get this. You're a detective working a brutal double murder.
Uh-huh.
The DNA evidence links the crimes, but the trail goes cold for over 20 years.
Wow.
And then a name pops up out of the blue, and it leads you to a guy known as the Zombie Hunter.
Oh, wow.
Crazy, right? That's the story we're diving into today, the case of Brian Patrick Miller and the Phoenix Canal murders.
What's so fascinating about this case is how it highlights the incredible advancements in DNA technology and
Oh.
how they can be used to crack these cold cases wide open.
Uh-huh.
We'll also be diving into the complexities of Miller's past
Okay,
and how his defense team tried to use it to explain his actions.
so let's set the scene.
Mm.
It's 1992 in Phoenix, Arizona.
Uh-huh.
Angela Brasso, she's a young woman about to celebrate her 22nd birthday. She's riding her bike along one of those scenic canals,
Mm-hmm.
just enjoying a beautiful evening, and tragically, it's the last thing she'll ever do.
Her body is discovered near the canal, and the details are horrific.
Oh, no.
She's been dismembered, and the brutality of it all just sends shockwaves through the community.
Imagine.
The police are left scrambling for answers.
And then, almost like a nightmare repeating itself, just 10 months later, another young woman vanishes while riding her bike along the canal.
Right.
This time, it's 17-year-old Melanie Burnest.
Yeah.
Her body is also found near the canal, dismembered, and with some unsettling similarities to Angela's case.
The discovery of Melanie's body, along with the DNA evidence found at both crime scenes, confirms the investigators' worst fears.
What's that?
They're dealing with a serial killer?
So for over 20 years, the case goes cold. Can you imagine the anguish those families must have felt not knowing who took their daughters from them?
It's unimaginable.
But then in 2014, there's a major breakthrough thanks to a forensic genealogist named Colleen Fitzpatrick.
Fitzpatrick was a pioneer in using Y chromosome DNA and genealogy databases to identify suspects. It's like a super high-tech family tree search.
Okay.
But for criminals,
Oh, wow.
her analysis pointed investigators to the name Miller, and that's when they came across Brian Patrick Miller's file.
Wait, so they already had him on their radar?
It seems so one of hundreds they were looking through.
What was his story?
Well, he had a prior record, including a conviction for aggravated assault when he was just 16.
Really?
He had stabbed a woman in the back.
Oh, my gosh.
But what's really shocking is that Miller wasn't some recluse hiding in the shadows.
Oh, there you go.
He had this incredibly public persona. He called himself the Zombie Hunter.
The Zombie Hunter. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What exactly does that entail?
Picture this. Miller would dress up in full zombie hunter gear, complete with fake blood and weapons.
Odd.
He'd drive around in a car decked out with zombie hunting paraphernalia. He attended parades, festivals, even posed for photos with police officers.
That is just wild. It's like he was living a double life, playing this character while hiding a dark secret.
So how did the investigators finally connect him to the murders?
They knew they needed his DNA to confirm their suspicions, and that's where Detective Clark Schwartzoff comes in. He came up with this elaborate plan worthy of a spy movie.
Okay, I'm listening.
He went undercover, posing as a security consultant, and offered Miller a fake job. Wow. Talk about thinking outside the box. Where did they even meet?
Of all places, a Chili's restaurant.
You're kidding?
And to make things even more complicated, Miller brought his teenage daughter along to the meeting.
Okay, now that is pressure. So how did the detective manage to get Miller's DNA without blowing his cover?
It was a tense situation, but Schwartzoff played it cool. He managed to get Miller to drink from a water glass, leaving behind enough saliva for a DNA sample.
So they send the sample to the lab, and then what happens next?
11 excruciating days later, the results come back, and it's a match.
Oh, wow.
The DNA from the water glass is a perfect match to the DNA from the Canal murders. The zombie hunter, Brian Patrick Miller, is their guy.
It's almost too crazy to believe. Did they find anything else to tie him to the crimes when they searched his place?
Well, the search of Miller's home was a challenge in itself.
Really?
It was a hoarder's paradise filled with clutter from floor to ceiling. But within that mess, investigators started to uncover a disturbing picture of Miller's life.
So it wasn't just the costume and the persona. There were actual signs of darkness beneath the surface. What kind of things did they find?
They found writings and drawings that revealed a fascination with violence and disturbing sexual fantasies. It was like glimpsing into the mind of someone deeply troubled. And remember that aggravated assault conviction from when Miller was a teenager? While he was in jail awaiting trial for that case, he wrote letters to his then-girlfriend, Amy.
Those letters, what were they like? Did they hint at this darker side of him?
At first, they were typical love letters with Miller proclaiming his innocence, but as time went on, they took a disturbing turn.
How so?
They became filled with graphic sexual fantasies, often involving violence and domination, and it gets even more chilling.
Oh, no.
Amy, who later became Miller's wife, revealed that his behavior after his release mirrored the darkness expressed in those letters.
That's terrifying. What was their marriage like?
According to Amy, it was a nightmare. She described Miller's sexual behavior as increasingly violent and deviant, often involving bondage needles and even a knife held to her throat during sex.
This is all so disturbing. And it paints a very different picture of Miller than the zombie hunter persona he presented to the world. So with his past convictions, his disturbing writings and drawings, and his ex-wife's testimony, how did he plead in court?
His attorneys took a bold and somewhat surprising approach. They admitted that Miller was the Canal killer, but argued that he wasn't guilty by reason of insanity.
Hold on. They admitted he did it, but claimed he was insane. What was their reasoning behind that?
The defense painted a picture of Miller as a deeply troubled individual, arguing that his violent tendencies stemmed from a horrific childhood,
Okay.
filled with physical and psychological abuse at the hands of his mother. They brought in witnesses to testify about Miller's upbringing, and even had a psychologist diagnose him with dissociative amnesia, suggesting that he had blocked out the memories of the murders due to the trauma he experienced as a child.
So in essence, they were arguing that the zombie hunter wasn't just a costume, it was a manifestation of a damaged psyche.
Exactly. It was a complex and controversial defense that raised questions about the role of childhood trauma in shaping adult behavior
Right.
and the legal implications of mental illness. But ultimately, the judge wasn't convinced.
What was the verdict?
After months of testimony and deliberation, the judge found Brian Patrick Miller guilty on both counts of first-degree murder. While she acknowledged the horrific abuse Miller endured as a child,
Yeah.
she concluded that it didn't excuse the brutal murders of Angela Brasso and Melanie Burnest.
It must have been a very emotionally charged moment in the courtroom when the verdict was read.
There was a sense of relief and justice for the families of the victims, knowing that the man responsible for their daughters' deaths would be held accountable. But there was also the weight of knowing that 2 young lives were tragically cut short,
Yeah.
and nothing could bring them back.
And how did Miller react to the guilty verdict? Was there any remorse or emotion?
Surprisingly, he remained stoic throughout the trial, showing very little emotion. However, before sentencing, he was given the opportunity to address the court.
What did he say? Did he maintain his innocence, or did he finally acknowledge the pain he had caused?
In a soft-spoken tone, he expressed remorse for the pain he had caused the victims' families, attributing his actions to the trauma inflicted upon him by his mother. He spoke about the abuse he suffered, the nightmares he had, and the struggle to cope with the darkness inside him.
It's hard to know whether to believe him. Was it genuine remorse or a calculated attempt to sway the judge toward a lighter sentence?
It's impossible to say for sure what was going through his mind at that moment.
Right.
But regardless of his intentions, the judge ultimately handed down the most severe punishment, the death penalty.
After more than 2 decades of waiting, the families of Angela and Melanie finally had justice. But I imagine closure is a different matter altogether.
You're right. The pain of their loss will likely never fully disappear, but there's a sense that the community can finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the zombie hunter is no longer lurking in the shadows. This case is a roller coaster of emotions.
For sure.
From the horror of the murders to the intrigue of the investigation, the shock of Miller's double life, and the legal complexities of his defense. And in the end, it underscores a chilling truth. Monsters can hide in plain sight, sometimes even behind a mask of heroism.
And for the families of Angela and Melanie, and for the community of Phoenix, justice has finally prevailed. But it leaves us with so many questions. How could someone who seems so normal on the surface be capable of such horrific acts? What role did his childhood trauma play in shaping his actions? And how do we balance the need for accountability with the understanding that mental illness can sometimes drive people to do unthinkable things?
These are questions that will likely continue to be debated for years to come. But one thing is for certain, this case reminds us that evil can wear many faces, and sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who blend in seamlessly with the crowd.
This case really makes you wonder how many other Brian Patrick Millers are out there hiding in plain sight. But it also highlights the crucial role that advances in DNA technology play in solving cold cases and bringing justice to victims and their families.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Without those advances, Miller might still be out there living his double life.
Right.
And the families of Angela and Melanie might never have known what happened to their daughters. So this case serves as a testament to the power of science and perseverance in solving even the most baffling crimes.
It's a story that leaves us with a mix of emotions, sadness for the victim's relief that justice was served, and a sense of unease knowing that darkness can lurk in the most unexpected places. It's a case that really makes you think about the people around you. Yeah.
It really does.
And the secrets they might be hiding.
Yeah, the fact that Miller was able to deceive so many people for so long is a testament to how good some individuals can be at concealing their true nature.
And beyond the human drama, this case really underscores the power of science and determination in solving even the most perplexing crimes. I mean, without those advancements in DNA technology, Miller might still be out there fooling everyone.
Absolutely. It's remarkable how far forensic science has come, and in this case, it was the key to unlocking the truth and bringing a killer to justice. But the case also raises some thought-provoking questions about the intersection of justice, mental health, and personal responsibility.
That's a really important point. On one hand, you have the undeniable horror of the crimes Miller committed.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have the undeniable trauma he experienced as a child.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile those two things? Where do we draw the line between acknowledging the impact of someone's past and holding them accountable for their actions?
It's a question that has no easy answers and one that legal systems around the world continue to grapple with.
Yeah.
In Miller's case, the judge recognized his difficult upbringing, but ultimately determined that it didn't justify taking two innocent lives.
So what can we as everyday listeners take away from this story? It's a complex case with so many layers. What are the key takeaways?
I think one takeaway is the importance of vigilance.
Okay.
We often assume we can spot danger,
Right.
but as this case shows, appearances can be deceiving. It's a reminder to trust our instincts and be aware of our surroundings.
It also speaks to the power of hope. For over 2 decades, the families of Angela and Melanie never gave up on finding justice.
Yeah.
Their persistence is incredibly inspiring.
Absolutely. And on a broader level, this case highlights the importance of supporting scientific research and advancements. Who knows how many more cold cases could be solved, how many more families could find answers, thanks to the continued development of tools like forensic genealogy.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the case of Brian Patrick Miller and the Phoenix Canal murders, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the most important takeaway is the power of truth. No matter how long it takes or how deeply buried it may seem, the truth has a way of eventually coming to light. And when it does, it can bring justice, healing, and a renewed sense of hope.
Well said. And to our listeners out there, remember that even in the darkest of times, truth and resilience can prevail. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of a killer and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.